They are living in extreme poverty. You have people in the rural areas and some in the urban centers who do not have any safety net, either in terms of guarantee minimum income on a monthly basis or any feasible means of income, but they are able to live by on a day to day, maybe through handouts or through communal support. They are living in poverty. And over the years, we have seen different steps taken by government to try and address some of these issues, including the Operation Feed the Nation, Operation Green Revolution by the Shagaris regime, poverty reduction stuff done by Babangida when he was in power, poverty alleviation program, and so many other initiatives have been taken, which today have not yielded the desired result. And that is why we still have um, over 70 million Nigerians living in poverty, and that's official figure. And I would guess perhaps a little bit more if you are to consider, those in the rural areas. There are people who are totally cut off from modernity. There's a place in Delta State which is about 3 hours on a canoe to get to that island, and they don't have any sign of modernity, no light, no water, no school, nothing. So the situation of poverty is, although it's pervasive in Nigeria, but we are not unique in it. But the problem is we have a very high population of people who are poverty stricken.
So for me, in getting ready to discuss this with you, I had cause to look at the political campaigns of the country from even from pre-independence into independence until present day. There's always been, the politicians have never shied away from the fact that there is the existence of the poor amongst us. As a matter of fact, I noticed in some campaign slogans, you've had goodbye to poverty and many things like that. But how come when it gets to after elections, getting to begin to make impact to push back poverty seems to be where we're not getting it? It's not in the recognition of that there is poverty in the land.
Yes, virtually all political parties, if you go through their manifesto, spoke about tackling unemployment. They spoke about, tackling corruption. They spoke about diversifying the economy in order to grow income. And some of them even spoke about income inequality. And virtually all the parties spoke about promoting education. And I remember quite uh, clearly that the former Emir of Kano even called attention to the plight of the disparity between gender, the female gender and the male gender in the north. Not only that, highlighted, the worsening plight of the female gender in the north, particularly the girls' child education, which he tried to promote before he was dethroned. Now, so there's no one is ignorant of the problems which we are faced with in relation to poverty. Like you correctly asked, the question is why are they not dealing with it when they end up in office? One of the major causes of poverty is corruption, and this is rife amongst the political class. We all know the stupendous amount of money which are being filtered or being reported as being filtered, which the EFCC is reporting. The latest, the most recent is the one in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, which a ministry dedicated to help the poor, finding itself in the midst of a 40 billion, fraud scandal, and which the SEC claim they have been able to retrieve 30 billion. So that exactly will tell you that many politicians are paying lip service, to the issue of corruption. For them, highlighting the challenges faced by the Nigerian poor during campaign is just a means of appealing to them for their votes. Once they get into office, they do little, in terms of tackling the problem. They are one of the major sources of the problem. Just exactly like what we're going through now. We all know what the governors are doing. People storing dollars and all that. When they get allocation, the federal government has been able to identify a pattern to it. That it's only when allocations are shared, and that is when we see forex being bought off the market, and This is a major problem. Of course, those politicians are aware that it will impact, if you don't have enough foreign reserve, it will impact on the prices of goods in the country because the naira will technically be devalued. So they are fully aware of the challenges, but they lack the political will to deal with the problem. Yes, we have been paying lip service to the issue of corruption, um, and to a larger extent to credit the current EFCC chairman. They have gone a long way to try and demonstrate to Nigerians that they now have the political will to deal with the problem, irrespective of who is involved. But that is not the only issue. One of the major things that we can do to ensure that we tackle poverty is to look at Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution, which says clearly that if you don't have a job, the state has a responsibility to provide welfare benefits. But it is not justiciable currently. You cannot go to court and say you want to compel government to provide welfare benefits for you. And that is a major problem. And except we put the burden back to the political class and make it justiciable so that when they are doing the annual budget, they will think about the need to make welfare provision for Nigerians, for poor Nigerians. That's quite very important. They have not bothered to tamper with that because they only have it just like when they do their campaigns. It's just a lip service thing. Another thing which we can do on this issue of poverty is education. You cannot have people who are largely uneducated, particularly in the rural areas, and particularly the 12 million Almajiri kids, and then claim you're going to have to elevate people out of poverty. How are you going to do that? Because at the end of the day, without any skill, they will have nothing to sell to anybody. So even if you have welfare benefit, it will only keep them above the threshold of poverty, but not really make them, a stakeholder within the economy. So we need to look at that. We need to look at the roads in the rural areas because it's one of the major problems the farmers are facing. Many people don't want to go to farm because they think it's less lucrative. And the reason is because the roads to evacuate goods from the rural areas where the farms are located to the urban centers, the roads are terribly bad. And because of that, that adds, to the cost of transport. It impacts on the cost of transport. So by the time they get their goods to the urban centers where they are bought, they realize that the profit margin is not attractive. So if you're not doing anything about that, we are not serious. Look at the issue of urban migration. What have we done about urban migration? Why are people moving to Lagos? Why are they moving to other parts of the country? It's because we have uneven, development in the country. If you have a combined and even development in the country, you will notice that many people will not need to travel far to make a living. And I can give you a good example. 80% of all industries in Nigeria are located between Lagos and Ogun states. And once you have that situation, which I understand why that situation evolved in that way, and is now exacerbated, by security concerns in the northern part of the country and some other parts of the country. But when you have an uneven development, you will end up having people moving away from the rural areas down to the urban centers. And what then happens is you have people roaming around the urban centers with no feasible means of income, with nothing to do, while in the rural areas, you do not have the people, the young people, to go to the farms, plow the land, and consequently, we end up relying on importation. A good example is grain, maize. We have fertile land to grow all the maize we need and probably to feed the whole of West Africa. But today we are importing grains, from Ukraine and Russia, and the simple reason is quite clear, because we do not have the young people, to go back into farming. Everybody wants to move to the urban centers. We have not created the necessary infrastructural development, for that will make life conducive for people who are living in the rural areas. No pipe-borne water, no good roads, no electricity, no schools. In some cases, children have to, trek up to 5 kilometers before they can get to school. So these are part of the problems which we need to deal with. It's multifaceted, I concede, but we need to begin to address them in addition to diversifying our economy from oil alone, being oil dependent, and look at other sectors that can create employment like agriculture, in order
All
to
right.
reduce poverty.
All right, thank you for that, Biodun Sowunmi. We're speaking with the public affairs analyst, Biodun Sowunmi. We're talking about the poverty rate in Nigeria, we're addressing the concerns of it. We'll continue the conversation on the other side. Stay with us.
If we have something that's related, let's go.
You what? For okay, let's look for hungry, hunger, or education.
Okay, let me go with hunger first.
Okay.
Hunger.
Let's try hungry.
I pulled it out. That's another thing.
Okay, hunger.
Hungry, right?
Yeah.
Hungry, hungry for your love. I know that's something.
Oh wow, it came up. Probably not.
That's not.
Should we do Greenland? What's her name? Tiwa Bello. I know I play that song all the time.
To come back together. Shall let's dive in.
We'll look for something though. Okay, we're coming back on. You're listening to Lagos Talks on Smooth 98.1. We're addressing the concerns about poverty levels here in Nigeria. Now, according to a report from the Guardian newspaper, the World Poverty Clock estimates that about 71 million Nigerians are living in extreme poverty. And the National Bureau of Statistics has its own stats as well. 133 million Nigerians are said to be multidimensionally poor, whether it's with regards to healthcare, education, or food as well. Our guest is Biodun Sowunmi. He is a public affairs analyst. So, Biodun, we've spoken about some of the possible causes of this poverty levels that seem to be high, very high, in fact. And there's a subject of policies that have been put in place by the government, which seem to perhaps have exacerbated the situation. How can we get the right policies that can, in the same way, try to correct this situation and make it better?
Yes, no doubt about it. If we look at the policies implemented recently, at least in the last 1 year, in Nigeria today, it has exacerbated the plight of the poor, while also reducing, the value of the income of those who are even gainfully employed. It has devalued living standards, no doubt about that. But the problem is, these are some of the necessary steps that has to be taken. If you look at where we were prior to those steps, you will realize that we're, heading towards economic collapse. We found ourselves in a situation where the past government, the Buhari's government, had actually, traded away all that has not been produced, in terms of in the equity market, and then obtained loans and tied them down, to the money we have in our foreign reserve. So while handling over $3 million foreign reserve, we only in real terms have $5 billion, because the rates were already pegged, to repay debts which were borrowed. So consequently, we find ourselves in a situation where we hardly can, support an import for 1 week in Nigeria. So then some measures have to be taken. We are a nation that consumes, particularly the elites, and the ruling class, the political class. We consume what we don't produce. Just to go to parties in Nigeria and see the number of champagnes and exotic wines, exotic whiskey, which Nigerians are consuming, when in reality we don't produce them. And these are all imported. They put strains on the forex. And once you have strains on the forex, if you have strains on the naira gets devalued in response to not having enough forex. And then that consequently impact on people. The same way government measure, to reduce or to tackle petroleum smuggling or the issue of subsidy has also exacerbated the problem, because today we have Nigerians' income has been devalued by 250%. The multiplier effect of removal of fuel subsidy. Now, several steps have been taken in the past to deal with this problem, which yielded no result. Now, today, we are paying a price for it, but that is a big price to pay, because you cannot do that without implementing some welfare measures to ensure that the poor, are catered for. But what we have done so far is to talk about palliative. What is palliative? It's just a relief. We don't want a relief. What the people actually need, is a welfare system that if you don't work, then you have a duty to be supported by the government. Otherwise, crime will continue to go up. We need to deal with some of these crucial issues. The issue of the rural areas are there. How many hospitals do we have in the rural areas? Even health centers. Many people do not have access to good health care. Same thing, no water. Even those in the cities do not have access to potable water. So there are a lot of issues which government needs to look at, including infrastructure, with a view to deal with this problem. But currently, as it is currently, while government is making efforts to stimulate local production of what we consume, the end of the day is we still need to diversify our economy, create more employment for our people, not necessarily relying on foreign direct investment, but also looking at the opportunities inward. I can give you a good example. When you look at what happened in Russia, following the sanctions imposed by the West, the Russians themselves, take over the assets. When the Western companies were pulling out, they took over those assets, and they've been able, to re-engineer their own economy in a way that Russia has become the biggest, the biggest, when you talk about PPP, income parity, the biggest in the whole of Europe. So you can take advantage of what seems to be a negative situation and we turn it around. We have Western countries, companies leaving Nigeria, and many of our rich political class, rich businessmen are taking advantage of it, and actually go into those sectors and ensure that we do not lose jobs. Keep
All
jobs
right, let's
within the
go
country.
on to the phone lines. We have some phone calls coming through. Good morning. Name and location. Very well, thank you. All right, Frank, go right ahead, please.
I want to point out the issue of some of the steps that have been taken, like subsidy removal, like the FX equalization and all that, which many of us applauded at the time they were taken because we felt they were necessary steps. But unfortunately, the government has not thrown back whatever were the savings into the economy. That's one of the major issues we have, because the savings that have been gotten, unfortunately, have just disappeared into corruption. And that's one of the items we have been fighting. We're asking the government to fight. The other one has gone into the high cost of governance. The politicians share the money, obviously. And unless the issue of corruption and cost of governance are tackled, we will still have a long way to go.
All right, thank you, Frank, for calling. Let's go back to the phone line, 0144899981.
Good morning, name and location.
Good morning, Dr. M.
Look, poverty has been discussed. I think one thing that leaves us is that we sounded too reductionist. Whether analyst on radio or TV, just on Saturday, this Saturday, I declined an offer from the particular station because I felt they are going to focus more on just the federal government, which means unfortunate. Later that the government and the local government chairman was just being scared. And that is why poverty is widespread. Widespread. Forget about the government and the governed. Government may have their incorrect policies, their ill-prepared decisions, bad governance, what have you. Yes, there are factors. What about the government? I use an example. You say same religion I didn't attend on Saturday. And a particular one I know, both in Lagos, and there are over 3 stations in Lagos. One last year, the other one 2 years ago, they floated a kind of vocational skill acquisition for learning. The one that did that 3 years ago, the fish station now, they had room for about 300 plus people to come in. And they were going to equip them, furniture, welding, interior decor, what have you, stop making. They campaigned, they advertised for months and months on end. So I think to accommodate 300 people or more. And I think they were going to equip them with kids, to go and start up something. But I tell that only 4 people, 4 turned down after months of, advertisement. Where do you put that? And for those who want it quickly, they want it quick, so quickly, what they end up doing, government is not doing this. As I said, you see, the government must be ever possible. I'm not a businessman in Nigeria, but I'm not for either. I'm a man of 4 parts. For example, I in Lagos, I deal with 4 different local governments. I have a president and 2 ladies. My office somewhere is in the cafe. I have a one little business in a papa, and I live in Icholo. I ensure that I know what transpires in all of with my local government chairman. And that is why I can't. I don't have to bother my head more to central government. I've never said that. In Nigeria, another Nigerian has only 19% or 20% dealing with the federal government. In maybe defense, national defense, and currency, and all the like. The remaining part of our lives are affected more by state and local government. Whatever happens to late right, Lagos and Kebbi, when we're producing right, they're producing right. Suddenly, we will not hold someone responsible. I'm going to strategy. I'm going to do a kind of thing. But that project has to die. Is that not the reason why it's too expensive? When late rice was in the market, it was affordable. Now today, a bag of rice bought by someone I know very well actually was almost 60,000 naira because late rice died. We are here to import. What am I saying here? Is this reductionist mentality of federal government alone? We'll go nowhere. And let the government also know that money will not fall from heaven. There have been opportunities. I gave the example of radio station floating program. I just put FM, a bigger station, to float maybe a volcano steel acquisition program. And you see how many people come out. Yes, that would have come on radio and over focus on federal government as their issue. I'm not bothered with that. But what do we have here? We're not able to even take ourselves out of poverty, create wealth, and yet to look at government and government zone. It is total destruction. I don't buy into it. If you don't want to remain poor, there are opportunities all around you. You go to university. You have been equipped to enter.
Okay.
Okay, that's how we just lost the call just dropped there right now, but then it's made its point, Dr. Moses from Isolo.
Mr. Sowunmi, do you think that other arms of government are getting an easy ride?
This fight against poverty.
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that all arms of government, both at the state level and the federal level, are supposed to be fully involved in the upliftment of the living standards of the people and in ensuring that nobody lives in poverty. Yes, it is correct that many people look up to the states, their state governments, to mitigate their situation or to ensure that their communities are developed. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at the issue of the local government, is a different case completely, in the sense that the states actually control the resources that goes to the local government, in the sense that we have heard of cases in many parts of the country where the local governments were complaining that they didn't have access to the federal allocation, which are due to them. Even though I agree that in federalism, the concept of the local government itself is an anomaly, because you cannot fund local government from federal allocation. You can only have the federating state and the coordinating federal government. There is no room for local government if you look at America, the way it has evolved in Nigeria. So leaving that aside, the local government do not have the resources to make a difference. So largely the resources are based with the state, and the federal government. But a lot also needs to be done in terms of the orientation of an average Nigerian. we place too much emphasis on paper qualification without considering the skills that people have. So, for instance, you want to employ a worker in the farm, you're beginning to look at whether he has a degree in agriculture or animal husbandry or crops or one thing or the other, rather than looking at the skills that he has. This man could have been involved in farming, he could have garnered experience in farming, but we don't go with that in Nigeria, we go with paper qualification. So we need to begin to look at our own mindset, as a people. The issue of vocational education is also very important. We've seen how we have even lost out on the poor skills level manpower which we have through JAPA. Many people rushing abroad, taking advantage of the shortage of skills manpower in Western countries. So we have even lost out more, but we are not producing enough people. How many people are going to technical schools, vocational schools? Currently, is very low, and that is why you see the skills, in Nigeria seems to be very poor. So government needs to invest in training people so that we can make their skills very attractive, not only within our own country, but even if they venture out of the country, they will not be able to command the necessary reward, since we also depend on remittances from diaspora, in our country, which is said to be about $21 billion a year. It's also one of the main sources of streams of income for the country. So therefore, a lot needs to be done by both the federal, the state government. I cannot see the local government playing major role in this because they do not just have access to the funds, to do it.
All right, you're still listening to Lagos Talks on Smooth 98.1. We see the phone lines buzzing and your messages coming through. We'll continue the conversation on the other side. Stay with us.
Future forward banking.
So we'll end just before 45. We'll end at 45. Okay.
Sure. So,
Thank you. Oh.
Don't worry.
It was down. You're my angel, a miracle. You're all I need to know. All right, we're coming back in 10 seconds.
We're Smooth 98.1 FM is still Lagos Talks 981, and we have our guest, Dr. Biodun Sowunmi, still speaking with us and helping us get a sense of it. So we just pick up from where we left off and then do a connection. So before we left off, you talked about there's an abdication of responsibility by the tiers of government. And so everybody thinks it is the responsibility of the federal government to lift the people out of poverty, when the federal government is just Abuja, that's what it is, and then having agencies across. So it looks like we're relieving the state governors and local governments of that responsibility, which they should be leading in the charge to fight and defeat poverty in the land.
Yes, there is also a logic to why people will continue to hold the federal government until we restructure the country. I will tell you what it is. The federal government today controls 52.8% of the federal, 52.8% of the federal allocation, whereas the state governments are only 36 state governments, they are only collecting 26%. If you go by an average of what was shared last year, a state governor or a state government, who is not collecting 13% derivation, simply, only got less than 1% of the allocation. And that was 0.78%. Less than 1%. And you have the federal government, the coordinating center, they do not even own the resources. The states own the resources, controlling 52.8%. So this is part of the problem which we have. And because the bulk of the resources are with the federal government, many Nigerians rightfully will look up to the federal government to do more. But we have seen how incapacitated the federal government can be. For instance, how do you regulate schools in Enugu from Abuja? It just does not add up. The federal government does not control land. These lands are owned by the state. Yet the budget of Federal Ministry of Agriculture is more than 50% of the state. The states own the land. If the federal government needs land, apart from Abuja, they have to apply to the states and state why they need the land, what they need it for, and subject to the approval of the government. So what are they doing with the money? When you talk about water resources, again, the budget is huge. It's more than all the states' budget for water resources. And what is the federal government doing about all that? So there are a lot of issues to be asked around the issue of the use of the over 52% share of federal allocation. So many people tend to blame the state government for not doing enough. But the reality is they don't have enough of the resources. We need to go back and look at what we have done, with our constitution. We need to reduce, look at the schedule, and reduce the functions of the federal government from the exclusive and move them, to the concurrent, and then, remove the unnecessary fund we are housed in Abuja. What is the best business of the federal government, with the roads in Lagos or with roads in Ekiti State? I just cannot see that. So we really need to devolve this responsibility to the states that own the resources in the first instance. And the federal government should simply concern itself, with the issue of monetary policies, issue of immigration, issue of customs, issue of defense and foreign representation. That should be their primary responsibility, not the idea of trying to, manage Abia State, from Abuja. It just will not work. Abuja is too distant, from the people. Not even creation of federal secretariat in each state will solve that problem. The fact of the matter is we need to restructure this country in order to address some of these challenges we have faced today.
So take us now, while I listen to you make this point, I could just see out there is this big one now facing the country, insecurity. Talk to us, how much has insecurity impoverished further people who are already broken as we speak in the country today?
In fact, our situation is being made worse by insecurity. One is it's a sword that will not only derail the federal government's program, but will also impoverish Nigerians more. I will tell you why. For instance, the federal government has been making so much effort. We've seen our president flying from one place to the other, vice president also going out, trying to lure foreign direct investors to invest in Nigeria. Well, no sensible investor will come to a country where you don't feel secured in the first instance, where you think that you are at risk, even your life is at risk. Nobody will come with the rate of kidnapping, and that will affect the government's effort to revive the economy. On the other hand, again, if we do not attract the necessary foreign direct investment, we may not be able to solve or reduce the unemployment level, and that will continue for some time. It will end up creating, social problems for the country. Already we have problems with our youth, engaging in nefarious activities like Yahoo, 419, and all that. And we have seen evidence that many of the people arrested so far or shot by the police so far over kidnapping are very young Nigerians, very, very young people. So if we don't do something about insecurity, we'll end up in a situation making crime very lucrative and very attractive to many young people. While we are tough on crime, we need to be tough on the causes of crime.
All right, let's go on to the phone line 0144 89981. Good morning. All right, go right ahead.
I know the point of when I talk to local government chairman and their incapacity. It's not true. These guys that are rich, what they collect on rent alone, the burial ground markets, they can do something. You're about to say, if you show willingness, then there'll always be a nature supporting you, if I put it that way. Governor Zulum of Borno State forever not of any lazy governor. He has to deal with international terrorists, and he has done something. If one of the community will still helping them all, he will do something. And with respect to this investment, to me, I see this John Ketten as an thing. The president going almost begging the vice president in 9 months, I've been out of control for almost 3 months put together. America has gun violence. They kill almost per second. The rate of put aside from gun violence in America in 10 years is not going to war. Don't people go to America for $20. So tell me that. So what is the see that insecurity? Insecurity is only because we have a war system in terms of security. Why must all of that come from Abuja? If I thought we share that, if we bring the police down to the level, governors, this governors will make it there. Why can't we regionalize the police system? So that there will be a regional police officer in charge. It can't be controlled by one governor. You have to be controlled by 6 governors. So that was impossible. So all our excuses fall flat. Except when the world has become global village. Local government collect rates. I know how much you come with sometimes. Just one time for your head. TV rate, radio rate, all these things. They generate billions, 5 million. So what does it about here? No, I say for any of government, they don't have to bring power. And that's why we're on our knees. Good morning.
All right. Thank you, Dr. M, for that. Going back to the phone lines. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
For me, this morning, talking about poverty and what government can do in order to actually bring people out of poverty. For me, I think it's quite simple. Like your guest have already said, the major bulk should be passed to the federal government because most of the policies that actually plunge people into poverty are actually carried out by federal government. For example, you're looking at insecurity. Between 2015 and to date, more than 2 million of farmers have actually left the farm because as a result of insecurity, as a result of farmer headers prices. And federal government has actually refused to curb these menace or actually find a lasting solution to this. So that 2 million people that have left the farm, you don't know how many people that are working within. All those people automatically they've been plugged into poverty. I think it was in one of the papers today that it was reported that about 729 schools or thereabouts have been shut down as a result of insecurity. Now, multiply 729 schools that have been shut down, the numbers of staff, the teachers, and those that work in that school, those people have actually been plugged into poverty. So when you look at it, you cannot but exonerate federal government for being actually the arrowhead in this issue of migrating people into multidimensional poverty. In as much as you will not exonerate the state governors because they also have a role to play. And you also look at the policies of government. The policy, the fuel subsidy removal and the floating of the exchange rate has actually plugged so many people into poverty. In as much as you want to do that, but what methodology? You need to come out clean. You need to come out straight and actually do this thing in such a way that it will affect people.
Okay.
When you look at it by and large, you cannot but blame the federal government. You go to exclusive list, for example, which your guest has also alluded to. There are so many items that federal government has no business in. Over last week now.
Chika, can we summarize, please?
Something. I think there's a need for federal government to actually go back and revisit some of their programs and also go back to the issue of fiscal federalism because they cannot hijack everything and at the end of the day, you expect us not to cut them some slack. Good morning.
All right. Thank you, Chika, for calling and sharing your thoughts. Let's go on to WhatsApp. AB says, a government that cannot think above palliatives cannot provide a lasting solution to poverty. Of course, they will always brag about building infrastructure, but the underlying truth, and a bitter one indeed, is that they always do it at an inflated cost over a long period, compounding the economic problems of the country as money meant for other areas of the economy is stolen in the name of building infrastructure. Another message message says, why can't Nigerians enjoy the benefits of being a major oil producing country? I'm saying this because of the huge impact subsidy removal had on the cost of living. I cannot live on the riverbank and wash my hands with spittle. That is from Abilade Ambo from Badagry. So, Mr. Sowunmi, I'm curious about this. Can we ever have a society where poverty can be completely eradicated? Is it something that is feasible?
There is no country that succeeded in eliminating poverty in absolute terms, but we can reduce poverty to the barest minimum, um, rather than allowing it to affect majority of the people. When you talk about, if you look at political ideologies, the real essence of communism is to try and ensure that nobody lives in poverty. Everybody, it's able to have basic services and access to virtually everything. But we have seen over the years that that has not worked. Rather, countries have moved away from communism, to the idea of socialism or venture capitalism, one way or the other. So it's clear that we may not be able to have a country that is absolutely free of poverty, but we can reduce that poverty to an insignificant number. And that has been done in many countries. I can give you a good example, which is United Kingdom. You don't really need to live in poverty if you are a resident in United Kingdom or you are an indigent. The simple reason is because there are welfare benefits. You are entitled to accommodation. Government will provide it. They provide, they make sure that water is running, electricity is running, but you have to pay for them. But in addition, government will pay you the welfare benefit, to live a comfortable life. And not only that, even if you're on welfare benefit, you still have access to what they call community loan to allow you to go to a foreign country, probably in Europe, and then you repay back through your welfare benefit over a year. So we still, in UK, you still have people living in poverty. There are people who are intentionally homeless. That is totally different. That is why I'm saying you may not be able to eradicate it completely, but you can reduce it to the barest minimum. That is very, very possible. So a lot needs to be done by our government. I think the starting point is to ensure that we create state police to deal with the security problem, and then look at the schedules attached to the constitution, wither it down, allow the states to have more resources to be able to carry out more functions. When in reality, when you look at each state, many people talk about their state government. They blame their state government for either achieving one thing or not achieving anything. Hardly will anybody mention the federal government. So it's time we restructure this country.
On this note, we want to say thank you so much, our guest this morning, and we say thank you very much for helping us get insight into addressing poverty rate concerns and how we can go about it. Our guest has been Biodun Sowunmi, Public Affairs Analyst. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And that's it for Lagos Talks this morning, but do stay with us. There's a lot more to come. Omatseye with you up until 11 a.m. Thank you so much, Mr. Sowunmi. Have a brilliant day.
Thank you.
Thank you.